Good evening. Welcome to Township Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, March 12th. Mr. Atkins, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a few board members out this evening. We have with us this evening Trustee Al Mansour, Trustee Lonnie Atkins, Clerk Lane, Trustee Massey, Dennis Lehman, our superintendent, Dave Laddie, our attorney, and myself, Scott Bennett. So welcome to the meeting. And we'll call the meeting to order with an approval of the consent agenda and the regular agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Support.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will move to privileged presentation. Well, I need to get on the right day here. We have a public hearing with regard to Green Valley repavement project. Mr. Laddie?
We do, and unfortunately, we're gonna do it two times. But I'm glad everybody's here tonight, if that's what you're here for. What we have certain notice requirements that we need to make for special assessment hearings. We usually have two of those, and you remember more than a year ago we had a special assessment hearing regarding the repaving project. And what has happened is we've gotten bids that we believe make it possible to move forward with the project, and so we scheduled this the second hearing, and the original date was for tonight. Unfortunately, we've got a technicality where we're going to have to come back and do this again, but the good news is, if you're here tonight, want to make a comment about the proposed special assessment role for the paving of the roads, you can do that tonight. You don't have to come back at our rescheduled date. Madam Clerk, what is our rescheduled date?
March 26th.
So, Mr. Supervisor, with your indulgence, if you want to call this a public hearing, that's fine, although I understand we'll be doing it again formally on the 26th. But if you want to allow folks to put their comments on the record, then you can certainly do that.
Okay. Well, we will open the floor now for public comment for our public hearing with regard to Green Valley repavement project. So we'll start on the left side of the room. And anybody on the left side of the room wish to make a comment? Yes, sir. Please come up to the microphone and give us your name and address. And everybody has 3 minutes to address the board.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Millwood. I live at 7252 Green Valley. I was just wondering, so we have a second hearing. Is there like a time frame if everything's approved where that road would get done?
Is there a time frame following the?
Yeah. If it's approved. And...
Well, Mr. Sears, any?
It'll commence as soon as the weather breaks, as soon as the asphalt plants get open.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
3 minutes.
Mr. Russian.
George Rush at 2441 Valley Lane Drive, Grand Blanc, Michigan, what you know. Being on the road project, being at Richard Hill, I don't know where he came from, because he come out with the biggest project there could ever be on a road. 7 inches of gravel, 5 inches of blacktop. Hell, they don't even do Grand Blanc Road, and here we are, a little subdivision, no traffic. But otherwise, why are you people letting him push that road project onto us? In your letter here, Mr. Bennett, you said that they are responsible, right? They're responsible for the roads and development, whatever. Anyway, is there any way Mr. Laddie can say, hey, you're going to pay for it, we're going to take you in front of a court and let the judge decide who's going to pay for the road? Another thing what you can do, if you want to do it the way Richard Hill wants, is we're paying 5.5072 and a millage for the county. That generates every year, for this year, is $6,740,486.71. Take the money out of that. Don't penalize us for what the township or county's supposed to pay for the roads. So is it possible you can do that? Or either, like I said, have Mr. Laddie take them to court and say, hey, these people, you own the roads, the roads need repaired, you repair them, you pay for them. So I have other things that can run by you, but I guess my time's probably up. But is there any comment on that you can take it out of this taxes that go to the county? I don't know whether it's for their roads or what they use the money for.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of money every year.
Mr. Chairman, I can
Yes.
add
Okay, Mr. Laddie.
to that. Unfortunately, I mean, your idea is certainly makes sense from a practical standpoint, but we won't be able to cause them to repave that road as a part of their county project. Yeah, that road is considered a local road, and the only way that they'll allow that road to be repaved is if we create a special assessment district and we proceed as we proceeded. So your idea is not a bad one, but it's not going to work.
You mean you can't take it out of that millage that we pay them every year?
Correct.
You can't do it.
You cannot.
But yet they can pass it on to us that we gotta pay for the road.
Correct.
And you can't take them to court and say to the judge,
I
can
can
I
take them
do
to
it?
court, but I wouldn't win.
Pardon?
I wouldn't win.
You wouldn't win?
Nope.
Well, you never know till you try, right?
Well,
Just like the Constitution says, hey, you got a right to go to court, you got a right to have a lawyer, right?
well, I appreciate your comment, but I don't know where he is on his 3 minutes, but
Yeah,
answer
it's
your question.
up, but 3 minutes is, we've exceeded it.
Pardon?
We've exceeded the 3 minutes, but
Okay.
in terms
Well,
of taking anybody to court, I mean, do we take
Uh-huh.
the federal government to court? Because, you know, they help fund the county as well in terms of road funding. I mean,
I guess
you
the
can
only-
probably take a lot of people to court, but
Yeah.
whether or not you want to spend
Thank
the
you for your
resources.
time, but anyway, I guess the only thing I can do is hire a lawyer for myself and say,
Sure.
hey. that's-
Yeah, you sue
Unless
the
the people
county
in the township, in our subdivision wanna get together and hire a lawyer,
and sue
if
the
not, I'll
county
get one
and the
for
state.
myself.
Sure, you
let
can do
them
that.
it. Okay, thanks a lot, Mr. Bennett.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Russian. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Don Martin, 2419 Valley Lane Drive. Just a question. Last fall, I understand construction season, it was $126,000 approximately higher than this spring. And the contractors were afraid of tearing up the road for the heavy equipment. So what's changed? I mean, the road condition's still the same. So what's the difference of bringing in the heavy equipment?
Mr. Sears, any comment or?
We don't have anybody from the road commission here to answer that, but it's just really the seasons of getting the bids is the big
Right.
contributing factor to being so cheap. And there was only one contractor that specified that. They were scared of that.
So who's
So-
gonna, what about the warranty on the road then?
That would have to be another commission, or road commission question,
Okay.
unfortunately. But if I can, if you leave me your name and number, I can get you that information.
Okay.
So, Mr. Sears, as far as the comment that the equipment would tear up the road, that was one of the contractors that bid on it. It wasn't the road commission that made that statement, right?
Yeah, that was one of the.
And as far as a warranty on the road, depending on the type of resurfacing we do determines or not that we do, that the county does, determines the length of life that road will have, correct?
Correct.
So the fix that this isn't a 20-year fix. It's more like a 5-year fix, right?
It's like a 5 to 10 year fix.
Okay. So in terms of warranty, I would let the road commission speak to that, but we do have a crack seal program. Would that
Yes, we'll
apply?
crack sealing on both roads.
For how
For
long
the length
period of
the
time?
assessment. For
So the
10
length,
years.
10 years?
Yep.
No, it's 5 years.
5 years.
Okay, 5 years.
So we'll do the crack sealing for 5 years after it's put down, but,
Okay.
okay. And I don't know, will the road commission be here for the next hearing, or?
We could certainly invite them.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, anybody on the left side of the room that would like to comment? How about on the right side of the room? Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Bill Maxwell, 7365 Green Valley Drive. And I would like to say I'm proud standing here and seeing you guys, and you do a really good job.
Thanks.
I have less than a comment than a question, and this guy can probably answer it. I was sort of confused by this because it seemed to be a lot more expensive last year. And which of the projects are they actually doing? Because there were 3 of them. One involved basically removing everything and then tearing the trees down and stuff. And then there were lesser ones, and I'm just curious.
Mr. Sears?
All they're
And just,
doing is-
Mr. Sears is our director for our township DPW,
Okay, thank you
so.
very,
They're
oh,
gonna put an asphalt cap on the road and they're gonna do drainage improvements.
okay,
They're gonna repair cross tubes and manholes.
okay. So are they going to take the ends of our driveways off,
They
or?
will not, no.
Okay, I thank you very much, and I thank you all here, and I am definitely proud to be here talking to you.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you once again.
Well, thank you, we appreciate your compliments. We appreciate everyone being here as well. Mr. Banasek? Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Craig Banasek, 2469 Green Acres Drive, or Road. I just wanted to say thank you to our neighbors who did a lot of work. I know Mary, and you had a team. She had to go through our neighborhood multiple times to get enough signatures and then take multiple options. So I appreciate all the work she's done. But I would just say this to the board: as you go forward, you need to think about an ordinance or some other legal remedy that doesn't involve sending out Mary to knock on every single door to get 50%. If our roads get below a certain grade, it makes the township look bad. And I understand that some folks can pay, some folks can't pay, or maybe they have a little more difficulty paying. But if roads are at a failing grade in a neighborhood, sales go down, upkeep goes down, and so I would love for this board to have some kind of policy that says, hey, we're going to have a special assessment zone for failing grades in our neighborhoods, because we drive all around this township, and our township, a lot of our neighborhoods are getting to be 60, 70 years old, and the roads are looking horrible. And if we want to, on a go forward basis, have neighborhoods we can be proud of, it's going to take more than just one of our neighbors. We're lucky we had neighbors who did all that work, but you know, a lot of us just don't have the time to go every door. So it is something I think this board needs to highly consider and take a leadership role on that. I know it probably wouldn't be politically favorable to all of you at any point, but it does need to be done. And I'm certainly not a fan of taxation. I mean, as I think many of my comments over the years here would point to, but that's one thing I think that's just obvious. So I appreciate all your work on it. The other thing is, as our budget opens up a little bit, as the tax base comes back, the township, and I think Mrs. Lane could attest, used to contribute toward these projects to about 25% of the project. I think you could give the exact number, Mrs. Lane. But as the tax base comes back, I think you need to think about setting aside money for these type of projects as used to be done in the township. I know it won't help our project, but I think it's something you need to consider as you set aside money. Thank you.
Thanks you, Mr. Banasek. Yeah, it definitely affects the rest of the township when a particular neighborhood's roads are falling apart, because, as you mentioned, you know, the home maintenance, I think, starts to slack off, and you're right, we could pass special assessment areas without getting a petition from residents. We haven't done that, and I'm not sure the township ever has done that at this point, has it, Mr. Lady?
Not that I'm aware of. Plus, there's an opportunity, if we did do that, if the township board initiated an assessment district, then there is a counter petition available for 20% of the residents to stop our moving forward with the project. But then that trips then the requirement that, again, that there needs to be a positive petition of more than 51% of the homeowners to move forward. So what we try to do is just skip a double petition process, and we haven't taken the initiative to begin a project without the majority of support for the residents in the past, and
Okay,
that's a tough decision.
right. But it does affect the entire township, so. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to comment? Yes, ma'am. It sounds like the young one has something he wants to tell us.
Yeah, she's cooperating kind of, so sorry for the baby noises.
Beautiful.
7435 Green Valley Drive. We're new homeowners in the area.
Welcome.
Thank you. I do follow you on our county page, so.
Okay, cool.
I have a couple questions. Because we are new, I don't have any documentation of what even they're proposing, so this was the first
Okay.
time we heard about it. So I was gonna ask if we could get like any documentation about it, because we had no clue. Second, we're a little disappointed because we live on the power line, so we haven't even lived here a year, and they're gonna rip up all of our beautiful trees in the back, and we're gonna deal with consumers as well as now the roads apparently. So that's kind of a bummer just moving out here. We love our neighbors. We're super happy here, but it looks like on both sides we're gonna have construction now and added expenses. So we're a little.
What is the
upset.
power line issue? I'm not.
So consumers is coming in and redoing their pipeline and taking almost all of our trees in the backyard. It's gonna start, I believe, I don't know if any of my neighbors, it's gonna start not this summer, next summer, and it's going to completely wipe out all of the trees in the back, all of my neighbors' trees. So it's kind of a bummer having both things at the same time. So, and I'm sure it's in the paperwork, but I was just wondering if there was any other option other than having it on our taxes. I don't know if anyone, like I said, if I had paperwork,
Sure.
I might know that, but.
We'll be glad to provide all the paperwork to you.
May I have your name, please?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, it's Katie Berry. Berry is spelled Bieri.
And the address?
7435 Green Valley Drive.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll
and
make
then,
sure you get,
is there gonna be a vote on this? Like I said, I wasn't sure.
yeah, there, Mr. Laddie?
Will be the township board moving forward approving the role, basically, because you've already voted to approve the district and create the district. And so there won't be a vote of residents per se, but the township board will now vote to accept the price estimate from the county and then to move forward with the role. And you mentioned a point about, is it necessary that this go on our taxes? It is possible that if you prefer, you can pay the amount up front if you want. Otherwise, we will put it on the tax roll. I think this is a 5-year project. We don't know what the interest rate's gonna be on it yet. It's gonna be determined when we borrow the money.
Yeah.
But usually the more popular way for folks to do it is to have it put on their winter taxes each year and pay it.
Okay. Well, I mean, my only comment to that is we'd rather not pay for it. I've never had the issue where the county wouldn't pay for the roads, and being a new family and being that we just moved to the area, all of our money is tied up just to live here, which I wouldn't have it any other way. Our neighbors are a blessing. We like living here, but it was kind of a shock and a big bummer, so just take that into consideration. I've already been trying to get, I think, 3 other people to talk to their real estate agents to live in Grand Blanc, just based on my experience so far. You know, young people with families, and you know, they don't want to know that all of our trees are being taken down by consumers, and oh, our roads being taken too. So I just consider that, please.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Mark Katinsky, 7352 Green Valley Drive.
Okay.
You said something about interest as far as if you pay it off. Is there an interest rate still charged?
If you pay it off by whatever, and what'll happen is, if they approve the roll, we'll begin to get the financing organized, and the date at which we actually close the loan for the financing, there'll be a period of time where you can pay it off without interest.
Okay.
And I don't know what that period of time is yet, but we'll let you know what that is and give you a chance to do it.
Okay. Also, additional details as far as the road. How wide? Are they taking our mailboxes out, putting them back? Because that was all talked about this last go around. And the approaches, as far as how are they going to do the approaches?
Mr. Sears?
The road will stay the same width as it is now.
Okay.
I'm not sure the logistics on the mailboxes. The driveways will be just tapered into what they are now.
Okay, so the asphalt taper.
Correct, yeah, and what your current approach is now from the elevation of the new road will be at.
Okay.
But I don't know that the project is gonna be long enough to require a mailbox relocation or anything like that.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
So none of the trees are gonna be cut down that were tagged last?
There are some trees that are gonna be cut down that are dangerous that are in the right of way, but I don't know the specifics on which trees or how far they're gonna go with that.
Okay, 'cause I was told our trees weren't gonna be cut down, but then they were tagged.
And I'm not sure what those tags mean or
Okay,
if they were just used for stake or
Okay.
staking or what, I'm not sure.
I just wanna make sure I want my trees cut down.
We can put them together with the road commissioner and send something out, yeah.
So we'll find out what, on the trees, what's happening on
We
that?
can send something out to us.
Okay.
Okay. So there's ditches along the roads throughout the neighborhood, right?
Sure. They'll be improved where needed.
So that the trees that would be cut would probably be somewhere near the ditch, right, or in the
Any tree
ditches?
that's gonna be cut is gonna be obstructing drainage or an unsafe condition
Right.
that's in the road right away.
Okay, yes. Good evening.
There. Mary Bedford, 7281 Green Valley Drive, Grand Blanc, Florida. I'm thinking spring. Anyway, first of all, I wanted to ask Katie and anyone else that's new in our neighborhood, is it not part of the buying and selling process that the new buyers are informed of what is going to be happening in that neighborhood? Did no one tell Katie that ultimately we were going to do the roads or anything like that?
I would leave that to our attorney. Are they legally bound to let them know?
They are, except because we have not adopted the rule yet, because there was such a gap. Well, there was uncertainty whether the project was even going to move forward, but because there was such a large gap and because we haven't approved the rule yet, it's very likely that the amount of the assessment has not become a lien on the property yet. And so once it becomes a lien on the property, then there's an obligation of the sellers. It's fairly common for escrow companies to become aware at least of the annual amounts that are due and to notify buyers of that amount. But it's very likely that that hasn't occurred in this case, again, because we haven't officially moved forward with the second public hearing, adopted the rule, and created a lien on the property.
Which we will do on March the 26th.
That's my expectation.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Laddie, there may be, individuals in the neighborhood that, I don't know if they would qualify or not, but we do have situations for hardship. Is that correct? Maybe you could explain how that works.
There are certain situations for hardships, but I'm going to have to defer. I think I'll defer to Mr. Limita to direct people to maybe the assessing department or maybe I'll let you defer to whatever department. I don't know the details of that, but I think that they are available under certain circumstances.
And I think what we should tell people, if that is the case, indeed, there's two things that we're looking at. The first one is with the Community Development Block Grant Funds, there's an additional $30,000 or $35,000 available right now. We sent the question out today to the Metropolitan Planning Commission to ask if they would allow us to use that money to be used to offset the special assessments for this project for people who were income qualified. If we hear back in a positive manner from them, which we didn't get it back yet today, but if they do approve that to move forward, then that gets handled through the Metropolitan Planning Commission. It doesn't come through us. There's some paperwork that you have to file, and they'll do it based upon guidelines on whether you qualify or not, and then that money could be made available. So we're hoping to see a positive outcome with that. Otherwise, if it's just a strict hardship, then you have the ability to work with the assessing department, and for that you would contact anyone in the assessing department, but our assessing director, Becky Salvati, would be able to help you through that process.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, yes. And this is public comment for the Green Valley. We're going to open public comment in a moment.
Judy Fossler, 7405 Green Valley Drive. I'm unclear which road are they doing. Is it the one where they're going to grind down 3 inches and replace that, or is this the one where they're just going to cap over what we have?
Mr. Sears?
They're just capping what's there now. They're gonna do some pavement repair in really bad areas, but they're just capping what's there now.
So they're not going to, okay, they're not going to grind down the bad road.
What was the
This is
change
just
on
the,
that?
yeah.
Yeah, nobody told us there was gonna be a change.
The change was the petitions that went around. There was 3 petitions. One was for the complete removal, which was a $2.1 million project. One was in between, and then one was just a cap, which was $100,000 project. This one was in the middle. George has got it there. This one was in the middle, and it's just an asphalt cap on top of the existing roadway with drainage improvements.
Is that what we voted?
I know, I thought we voted.
I thought we voted
We didn't have enough.
for the middle of the road? No, we got the middle.
That was the petition that had the majority.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment with regard to the paving project? With that, we will close public comment. Did you have?
I have other things not to do with Green Valley that I wanted to just mention.
Okay, all right, we're going to open public comment in just a moment, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing for Green Valley repaving. Any additional comments, Mr. Laddie?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Sears? Okay, with that, we will open the floor for public comment. And ma'am?
It would be nice, I have to say, to get Mr. Hill here for the 26th.
From the road commission.
You know, from the road commission. I've talked to him several times, and I think he'd
Okay.
be more than willing to come. Well, to add insult to injury, as far as not getting the road that we wanted, Linda Tremblay, myself, and obviously Katie and her family, who have just moved in to our subdivision, we were notified by an engineer from Percheron who happens to deal with Consumers Energy. And as everyone knows, they're putting in a new gas line, the Saginaw Trail, or whatever it's called. Well, I have all the diagrams, which I won't get into this time because I'm feeling we're going to need another meeting on this. It's a David and Goliath situation. Where we are in the neighborhood, I have 300 feet backing up to Dort Highway. Linda has 2 lots. So many people in here back up to Dort Highway. This guy came, offered us a certain amount of money to use 14 feet of our property from their easement. And she and I, and my husband, we all looked at the paper and, you know, didn't say much. We walked around a little bit. Then the second time he came, the offer had gone up $2,000 because we made a fuss. We have probably, just between Linda and I, 30 to 35, probably 100-year-old oak trees. And I feel like this is a David and Goliath thing. I cannot fight Consumers Energy. I have put in a call to Consumers Affairs that handles the issues like this, I guess. As I was getting dressed to come here, I got a phone call from the gentleman that had been out to our house. They had already come and staked the side of their easement, et cetera, and he asked about signing the papers, and I said, no, we're not going to sign the papers. And come to find out, he told us he thought it was only Linda and I that were back to back, that had the biggest line in the back. Anyway, to make a long story short, they want to take down all of these trees. They want to bring in all this heavy equipment. If they take out all of these trees, we have absolutely zero, nada, buffer against Dort Highway. It leaves us wide open to people parking on Dort Highway and coming in, being at my back door in 2 seconds. It leaves us wide open to the noise on Dort Highway. It leaves us wide open to the noise that Alro Steel makes at all hours of the night. It's going to destroy property value. Like I said, some of these trees I can't even put my arms around, they're that big. So I asked the gentleman tonight to talk to their engineers about going around the power lines. We are where the power towers are. There's one right behind us. If all of that is taken out, we have zip for a backyard. We have grass, and they're willing. They're up to $4,500 now. But I said, you know, $4,500 is not what we want. We want our trees. So my question is, I guess, or my wish is, that I can know that I can count on the township somehow. I don't know if you have a tree ordinance. I don't know exactly how you handle these things, but I want to fight consumers' energy. I don't want my trees gone. It's going to be a mess. They're still going to be on my property, 14 feet of my property, taking all these trees down, et cetera, et cetera. And so I asked him tonight, I said, can't you go around the power tower, and there's plenty of room and all that. And I guess because of the diagonal treatment or specification, he was hem-hawing around. He did not sound happy that I told him that Linda and I were not signing the papers until we talked to someone. So I would just like to know that I would have someone that I can come and talk to that's going to help back us in this. I mean, it's not my fault that the gas line is
Right.
40 years old.
We've actually had this conversation with individuals in other parts of the township because obviously they're going through the entire township. So we have had similar conversations with them where they didn't feel they were offering a fair amount, and they ended up hiring an attorney to help fight their case. But Mr. Laddie, any thoughts on what rights an individual would have in the township, or where the township would land on this?
Well, it's interesting that, well, from a property owner standpoint, it's just interesting that you framed it in that David versus Goliath situation, because a public utility will be able to get the access that they need to accomplish whatever improvements they need. If they're going to encroach on your property, they're going to have to pay you fair value for that. I heard you say earlier that money's not what you want. You want to try to persuade them to go in a different direction. I think that you should explore, you and your neighbors, whoever's affected, should explore those options with an attorney who is versed in condemnation law, because I've found that one of the best ways to get them to consider the most necessary route is to actually confront them with some sort of economic penalty if they're going to take part of your property. And if you would like, I'll give you my card. You can call me, and I'll refer you to some attorneys. Because I represent the township, I don't do that kind of work in the township, but I'm happy to refer you to some attorneys. I think that the township, and I'll talk with Supervisor Bennett and Superintendent Lemata, the township may be able to make a comment about the route and the effect on properties. But in my experience, the best chance you have to influence is to consult with a private attorney and explore your options as a private property owner to get compensation for that. So I'm going to give you my card right now. You can give me a call, and I will be happy to refer you to some attorneys who may be able to help you.
Ms. Lane?
Through you to DPW Director, Mr. Sears, with this quandary with consumer energy, the part I would be concerned about is I don't want consumer energy going on Green Valley roads with construction equipment. We had that problem in Concord Green with the township the year after we had ours done, and it wears out the road.
I would assume with the project, as I know it, they won't access the property through Green Valley Drive at all because it's along their easements. But I don't know that portion of the project yet. I haven't introduced it to the township because that lake is another year or two out. So we've been focused on the next lake that's coming this summer. So, but I don't know that there's access through Green Valley Drive, but we could certainly make that known to them.
Yeah, I think they've got plenty of right-of-way along the power lines that they can get in and out. I've seen trucks back there already.
I don't believe they have easements through any property on Green Valley Drive to make it back to their easement along the drive.
Right.
I think they have plenty of access there.
Yep.
Yeah, they'll come through the Dort,
Right.
the Dort Highway thing.
Reed Road.
But again, the angle that it goes, there are people that will not be affected. But yet we've got over 600 feet of property
Sure.
and 100-year-old trees and no buffer.
Yep.
So I just wanted to feel somehow that I would have someone in the township that would be backing us, trying to get this handled, for them to make a zigzag around the power tower, so they wouldn't come in another someone's already been out there and put stakes up. And if they come in the 14 feet that they want, there's no amount of money that's going to replace.
I'll be certainly glad. I don't know who you're working with at Consumers, but I'll be glad to talk with them, meet with them with you, and see if there's any way around that.
Yeah, okay.
Because obviously, all of us are very familiar with that property along there.
Well, and again, it's our property value, you know, that whole neighborhood is full of mature,
Sure.
beautiful trees.
Yes.
And to have that taken away and then to leave us to look at Dorrit Highway
Mhm.
and 2 power towers is not my idea of a home that's going to sell fast.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'll give you my card, or you probably have my number, but give me a call and I'm glad to meet with you. Okay.
Can I
Yes,
say something on
sure.
that? And again, maybe I'll just talk to Mary later. Same thing, I'm down, I don't know, 10 houses from you. And yes, the man was at my house over the weekend, and I was told, when we talk about David and Goliath, don't discuss the money with your neighbors. Don't tell them what I'm offering you. And he told me that they bought the house, which I'm not supposed to tell, down on Grand Blanc Road. That's how they're gaining access. He told me that they've already purchased, not the house on the corner that's for sale, but he said that's probably why they put their house for sale, is because they know the house next to them is going to be torn down for access. I'm losing my shed. I'm losing my big vegetable garden that I use to eat all year. I'm losing it all my trees, everything in the back, 15 feet in. And the stake is right at my shed, 15 feet up. So it's surprising you guys don't know anything about it. How is that possible?
Well, we know the line's coming through, but they don't tell us exactly where, you know, that line's going to lie.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got easement already, so I mean, we know what property they own.
Right.
I have a picture from the air
Oh.
of their easement.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so do I.
You know, I do have
Yeah.
a picture of that.
Right.
So.
But, like I said, I feel in my heart of hearts that they're going to say, too bad.
He told me, I said, well, what if I'm not signing? What if I don't sign? And he said, they're gonna get it done whether you sign or not.
Right.
So we can compensate you, or we're gonna get it done anyway. And they're offering you more money than they offered me. So, absolutely.
They started at a low figure and came
Yeah.
back the next time and it was more.
So it sounds like maybe something in your neighborhood, if you got together and had an attorney, maybe make it a little bit tougher on them, and they,
The only thing is, tonight, as he called me before I came here, he told me that Linda and I were the only ones affected.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I wish Steve and Julie were here because the stake is in Steve and Julie's yard too. So I know that
Okay.
they're coming 15 feet up into their yard. Anywhere where
Okay.
you see that stake, they're
Yeah,
going
yeah.
15 feet up.
And,
Yeah,
yeah.
so.
well, maybe
Okay.
it sounds like your neighborhood needs to have a meeting.
Yeah, so
Yes, sir. Come on up to the podium.
Because Judy came up and said that, are they going along the whole east side of the neighborhood and taking that whole backyard, the whole neighborhood?
Everything. He told me to be flat. He said, you'll probably be able to see Dorrit Highway. We're gonna flatten it completely out. And behind my house, there's a large, becomes like a bog or a pond when it
We
rains.
have wetlands, yes.
They flatten that out, that's in my yard. That's gonna be just a
They
nightmare.
told us they were born under the wetlands. I said, well, I can't touch the wetlands, how can you?
Right.
Well, maybe we can help arrange a meeting with consumers so everybody can get a clear picture on what actually is going to happen.
Great.
Before we
Okay.
put our house up for sale.
Wow.
Everybody just
Okay.
I'm sorry, one more.
Sure. Come up to the podium if,
Next March.
You gotta go up to the podium so that I
Okay.
can be on the official record. This is Bill Maxwell. I do have a house along the back, and the guy hadn't showed up before, but he did show up yesterday, and he was very sleazy, and he was trying to get me to sign a document, and he was saying everything. That was the guy. Does that look familiar? No. Okay, well, then they sent somebody else. He was just a contractor out there, and he was saying anything to get me to sign that document, basically. No, I wouldn't sign it. I have about 10 trees along the back that are super large, super tall, and they take and hide the towers, and it's the same exact thing. And he actually said, well, almost all of your neighbors have already taken it, so you might as well take the money now. I did not believe him at all, but he was saying anything he could do to take and get me to sign that document. He was hanging on me like anything. And I kept on saying, no, it doesn't matter, I want my trees.
well, let's see if we can't get a meeting with your neighborhood with consumers or something.
And-
Do you have a neighborhood organization at all, or?
And one thing that he did, say, he said the pipeline wasn't going to go through. It was going to go through on their easement, but for the convenience of their construction, they were going to remove the trees. And I thought that was interesting, because I actually marched out and he showed me where the pipeline was going, and I said, isn't there enough room on either side for the, without removing the trees? And he said, no, they're going to remove the trees because they got big equipment that's coming in, and it makes it easier for them to build it.
Okay.
So make sure you have my information.
Yes.
All
Okay,
right.
I thank you guys again for letting
Okay.
me
No
talk.
problem.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Ert?
Not on the,
No, we're done with the public this is public comment now.
okay.
We wrapped up the public hearing a few minutes ago on the Green Valley.
Maybe I could have the podium here, young man.
Okay.
Thank you. Ed Hurt, 7212 Porter Road. I just wanted to make a comment on fire department. City is asking for the High Street station to stay open while we're contracting to them, if we're contracting to them. I ask you to look at the ISO ratings too, because that's very good for the city people, I would imagine, having a fire station right there in the middle of the city. And again, quick response time for the residents of the city, longer response times for the residents of the township, and so on. The city should pay a premium for those kind of premium services. We're right there to take care of them. We're taking care of them better than we are. They should pay a premium for that, not a cost. The council is asking for premium service at cost. With having them as customers, okay, there is a cost to that too. There's a contracting fee, there's administrative fees, there's legal fees, and on and on. To be able to have a customer, you just don't write a document and make an agreement without cost. Cost is not enough, okay? If we stay at the High Street station, will the city have any problems with a sign out front that says Grand Blanc Township Fire Department? It is Grand Blanc Township Fire Department. And if they're asking us to stay in that building as Grand Blanc Township Fire Department, we should be able to put a sign on it. I wonder if they'd have a problem with that. Anyhow, that's exactly what we're talking about. And that's what it should read if we're there. I'll move on from fire department to parks and recs. The city's involvement is a liability in parks and recs, not an asset. I see no asset to having the city involved in parks and recs. They're no asset to the township, they're no asset to Parks and Rec, they're no asset to the school. They bring nothing to the table. On to still Parks and Recs, I see this thing in the paper that $50,000 that Genesee County is throwing in for Bicentennial Park. Someone complained, obviously one of our customers complained about our fields and threatened to leave our park. How did this come to that? The commission needs to be proactive, not reactive. Anybody can react to a fire. They let a fire be created. They should have headed this off. They need to be proactive. And they weren't. And that's just kind of showing what's going on. One last item. And I won't go on with this. I got all kinds of data. I've been making city meetings, and because there's so much going on between Parks and Recs and the fire. But I see in some of their meeting schedules, they have agendas, and that's it. Then they have agendas with enclosures in there, but the enclosures aren't on a website. You don't know what they're talking about. I go to these meetings and I watch them reading what they're talking about on their agenda, but nothing's disclosed. And they made sure they had an agenda with a packet when they're disputing with the township in regards to the fire chief's pay increase. They had that. They had a packet, nice long list. Say what we did, what we didn't do. But then when they want nothing to be said, like they did at the last meeting I was, it wasn't in the packet. They had ENC there, something enclosed, and you see a council person sitting here reading a motion. Why don't they put that in their packet? In tomorrow's meeting, they have an agenda again, with enclosures and no packet. On that agenda, it says 6B, Grand Blanc Parks and Recreation appointments from Grand Blanc Township. Are we appointing someone, or they're having a meeting about this and they got some document there that they're not disclosing? Maybe you've sent something to them, I don't know, but it's exactly what it says on their website, but they don't include what they're talking about. So, I wish they were a little more transparent. They pick and choose what they want to be transparent about. It's obvious. I can give you the dates and everything on it. At the township, there's full transparency. Any resident here can go to the YouTube. They can see audio, video of your meetings, what you said, your expression and everything. There's a full agenda, there's a packet of what you talk about. You're fully disclosed. And I appreciate that, and I thank you for that. It's very difficult with the city, but I'll get down to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. I really I haven't looked at the agenda for the city council meeting. I usually don't, but I'm not quite sure what they're talking about. I haven't appointed anybody, and this board hasn't appointed anybody in recent time to the Parks Commission, and if we did, it's between the Parks Commission and us. Ms. Lane?
Our most recent appointment was when Mr. Atkins took over for Mr. Thomas, and we reappointed Tom Pettit as our representative, just so this board knows who our appointments are.
We know that, but that was, I'm not sure why that's city business, but maybe you can tell us after the meeting tomorrow.
I will.
And I appreciate your comments. We do everything in public here, I think, with the exception of some contracts and some personnel issues. Our packets are online several days prior to every meeting, that any resident can look at anything that we're looking at bids on, quotes. We have that all in our packet in advance of the meeting, and anybody has any questions of anything else, we'll be glad to provide it. But I appreciate that, and we do have our meetings on YouTube following a couple of days after our meeting. So, okay, with that, any other public comment? Mr. Bush? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jim Bush, 5243 Lethbridge Road. I want to talk about Parks and Rec. I read the story in the paper about the ball fields, and it makes sense that we need to do that. But then I start looking at the numbers, and I'm like, where's this money coming from? They're getting $50,000 from the county. One story says it's $150,000 to do the fields. Another one talked about a different number. Where's this money coming from? Why was this budget not approved by this board? Why does Parks get to operate in their own little bubble, and then the city gets to help decide how to spend our money? It's just a big concern on my part. There seems to be this black hole, and if they can come up with $100,000 to do a ball field, which may be their portion, may not, depends on the numbers, then what about other projects that need to be done in the park? Then why do they come to you for that money? Where do they decide how to do this? Those are all questions I have. I really think a deep dive needs to be done on Parks and Rec. I think the budget needs to be looked at. I think their finances need to be dug into. And I think it needs to be public and open, not this pseudo group running somewhere and doing stuff with our money. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you.
Just for clarity, So the county provided some money for the fields. One of the things that probably most residents aren't aware of is there's some major tournaments at the Parks and Rec, which we encourage, which really bring quite a bit of economic benefit to our community. I mean, on any given weekend, we might have a tournament with 90 teams, probably 25 to 30 people per team that come into our town from all over the state. And the hotels will be full in the area, the restaurants, what have you. One of the things that happens with the county is that there's a county hotel room tax. All that tax money goes to the Visitors and Convention Bureau. It's run by the county. In this case, they're giving some of that money back because that money doesn't stay, that tax on the rooms does not stay in our township. It actually goes to the county. So they are giving back some of that money, which we like. The other thing is that all of us that live in Grand Blanc Township pay into a millage for county parks. We don't have a county park in Grand Blanc Township. And so they're using, I believe, a portion of that money to give back to us too, which we've been asking that they help with some of our projects that we'd like to do. You know, one of the things that has been at the top of this board's list is to have non-motorized pathways. And we actually have plans for one eventually down Dort Highway and to actually go on some of that property that Consumers owns behind Walmart and up through Burton. But bottom line is the good thing is that the county is giving back some of that money. But in terms of the finances, in terms of how the parks is run, in terms of the city, you know, in terms of, you know, relationship with running Bicentennial, we are working on that, and we will in a few moments be taking a deep dive into our discussion on where we're at with that whole situation. But I appreciate your comments and your input. Okay. Any other public comment? With that, we will close public comment and go to our fifth item. And if you would like to leave, we appreciate all of you being here, and we appreciate your work on the street paving project. Okay? We'll give you a moment to leave, and you're welcome to stay too if you'd like. With that, we will review our township board agenda for our meeting on March 14th. And on Thursday, we will be having a privileged presentation. The board will recognize the recent promotion in the police department for Detective Molly Machinsky. And Detective Machinsky was promoted after former Detective Todd Gilbert was promoted to sergeant. And I'm sure they probably will be here on Thursday, right, Chief? Okay. We will have on Thursday as well a public hearing regarding the input, or to get input on the proposed DDA development and tax increment financing plans. And we did, Mr. Ladd, you want to report on your Citizens Committee?
I would just briefly. The Citizens Advisory Committee met last week, actually last Thursday before the Planning Commission meeting. We had 5 members of our committee there. They were focused primarily on the types of improvements that will be done in the DDA district from an infrastructure standpoint, and particularly proposed road improvements for Baldwin Road, including widening and changes to the quality of the surface of Baldwin Road. There were concerns that, just like some of the commercial truck traffic owners in the area, they were concerned that there's already a fairly significant amount of commercial vehicle traffic in the area, and they're worried about the effect potentially on the residents in the area. If for example, Baldwin Road gets widened, would there be property that would need to be condemned, just like what we heard about earlier? Would the vehicle traffic increase from a truck standpoint? If there are some changes to the truck routes, would that have a negative impact on the commercial properties in the area? And then the focus shifted down to Pollock Road, and particularly with any improvements to the DDA, to Pollock Road, Baldwin Road, and particularly with the coming improvement to the Dort Highway extension, will that cause increases in traffic on Pollock Road? And what would be the effect of that potentially to residents in the area? And so their creation was to focus on the impacts to residential properties. They did exactly that. They asked great questions, and I think you're going to see them here. And what I'll do, I will forward the minutes of their meeting to you so you can have them on the dais for Thursday night. I think you'll see one or more of them here, and maybe offer some comments along that line. And I'll also forward these comments to the DDA directors. They're going to meet a week from tonight, but you're going to have your public hearing before that. So these are things that as we proceed through that public hearing, and as we hear comments from the Citizens Council, you can weigh in on it and contemplate. And these are issues that we're going to have to address for these folks, because they're just common sense, reasonable issues. And so we'll see where that hearing takes us Thursday night. It'll be interesting to see who shows up and what their issues are.
And I had a gentleman call me today as well that couldn't make it to that meeting and voiced similar concerns.
Correct.
And he probably will be here Thursday.
Good.
Okay. All right, with that...
Question?
Yes,
Just
Mr. Mansur?
out of curiosity, we had some discussion about the situation going down the west side of Dort Highway by the Green Valley. Is any of that area inside the DDA zone?
I don't think that it is.
No. It's all south of all the discussion that they're having is north of Grand Blanc Road. The DDA, the furthest north that it goes to is to Baldwin Road. Pretty well, it goes a little bit north of Baldwin up to 75. That's about the extent of it.
All right.
The 75 would probably be the northernmost border.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on that? All right, we'll move on Thursday to public comment, and then we will have the approval of the minutes. In our consent agenda, we'll be covering the treasurer's report.
Question?
Yes.
It typically asks us, is there any revenue or expense item that is abnormal to the budget in terms of the level of expense for this time of the year in the budget?
I didn't see any.
No?
No, there's not. We will be bringing some budget amendments. Last year didn't really have any till almost the end of the year, but you'll be seeing some earlier. Just one was higher than anticipated to do with the actuarial evaluation for OPEB, and that was because we had to do the new report in compliance with the new GASB rules. But it was there's nothing that's unusual at this point through the budget actual.
Thanks.
Okay. And then also under consent agenda, the board will consider a motion to allow the DPW to proceed with tree removal along District 8 sewer improvement route using the Genesee County Road Commission tree contractor, Grand Rapids, quite the name there, CHOP, huh? For an amount not to exceed $30,000 and authorize Township Superintendent to execute all related contracts and documents. The item C, the board will consider a motion to approve the purchase of a new Snap-on Mechanics tool set for $21,004.98 from Snap-on Industrial using My Deal and authorize Township Superintendent to execute all related contracts.
Quick question on that?
Yep.
So, two questions actually. First, what is the disposition of the old tools? And second, do we need this new storage or can we use the existing storage?
Good evening. From what I understand from Steve, our head mechanic, is the tools that we have here will fill a lot of gaps. Plus, in hiring our second mechanic and possibly a third mechanic in the future, we'll probably need all of what we have plus the new set that we have. The storage that we also have is quite dilapidated, so he was looking for a set with new storage. More than likely it will all be combined into the new storage.
So we'll basically be keeping the whatever tools
I believe he would be
still
keeping
useful.
most of it, yes. Yeah.
I actually spoke informally with Steve, with our Mr. Chillicott, our head mechanic, today. I happened to run into him, and he was saying that, a a lot of that stuff is over 30 years old, and the technology just has changed, and he said he'll appreciate having the tools to,
Absolutely.
So. Yes, Mr. Massey?
Sure. Is there something like an auction for resale value of these tools?
If we were to sell them, they would be put in a lot and sold on gov deals. Everything the township sells, cruisers to any kind of equipment, goes on govdeals.com, so it's a public auction.
Okay.
But actually, we're going to keep these tools.
Yeah, I don't believe Steve will be getting rid of any of them.
Right. And we have a new mechanic coming on, so.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Sears. And thanks for your help with the road
No problem.
public hearing. Item D, the board will consider a motion to approve the purchase of two 2019 Chevy Tahoe police pursuit rated four-wheel drive marked vehicles for the amount of $73,814 and up to $10,000 for ancillary equipment to outfit the marked vehicles to be used in the patrol division for a total cost of $83,814. Mr. Atkins?
Question for the chief.
Sure.
I'm not real familiar with the current fleet, but have you ever looked into anything other than a General Motors vehicle?
We have. In the past, currently we have an all General Motors fleet. We have Tahoes and Caprices. Prior to that, we've had Crown Victorias, which is a Ford product. Later in the year, I have to make a decision to replace one of my Caprices. That'll be the next vehicle out of service. We have a handful of officers that just like a smaller car, and the Tahoe is not one they feel comfortable driving, so we have to make a decision. The problem that law enforcement has is that there are no more passenger cars, pursuit-rated passenger cars for law enforcement. So do we go look at the Explorer, which is a little bit smaller than a Tahoe, or do we just go with the Tahoe and keep them all straight? There are some manufacturers that I'm not in favor of going to just because of reliability issues I've heard from other departments, so that's a decision and a bridge we're going to have to cross in the very near future.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mansor?
Not so much about the replacement vehicles, which are basically four-wheel drive vehicles.
Correct.
Versus ones that we're replacing that we're not. But I noticed in the ones that we're replacing a patrol Tahoe and then a civilian Tahoe. So can you explain to me what the civilian Tahoe is about?
The civilian Tahoe is a 2007. It's an old vehicle, and that's one of the reasons why we're taking it out of service. Many years ago, a lot of departments had to make a decision. Pursuit-rated vehicles, which is a little lower center of gravity, so you can drive it in a little bit more aggressive manner when needed in the duties of a police officer. And the civilian is just one that you or I could buy off the lot, higher center of gravity, handling isn't quite as good. A lot of the enhancements that you see in the pursuit-rated police vehicles are not present in the civilian model. Most departments are totally getting away from that. This is the only civilian model we have left in our fleet. It is a 2007. It's just time for that vehicle to move on.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a schedule of replacement for all these vehicles. This is right, Chief. I mean, for newer board members or for the public, we replace these on a set schedule.
We do. We have a fleet of 17 marked cars. We try to replace 2 to 3 vehicles a year. Typically with the Tahoes, we replace them about 130, 150,000. And the Caprices, the sedans, a little bit less, 110 to 125, somewhere in there. And depending on condition, of course. You know, Steve Choka does a great job keeping those things serviced, keeping them on the road. So we're blessed to have an in-house mechanic with his skills.
Just out of curiosity, I've never asked this before, but you know, with fire equipment, there's ISO ratings and NFPA standards in terms of the NFPA standards would say after 20 years that trucks and all. Are there standards for police cars and are we within those?
Not as specific as you might find in fire services. Yearly, Michigan State Police does critiques and testing of police vehicles, so they can kind of tell how vehicles perform, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But as far as how long one should stay in service, there's departments that run till the wheels fall off. Refurbishing vehicles used to be a big thing. However, that didn't seem to be cost effective. We tried here at the township several years ago, and we just weren't getting bang for the buck down the road refurbishing our old vehicles.
Yeah, and plus different police departments probably use them in different ways, which cause them to age a lot quicker than others. Yes.
Chair, I have a question for the police chief. When you look at replacing vehicles, do you take in consideration the mileage on that vehicle?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do monthly mileage reports at the police department, so I know every month what the mileage is on every vehicle that we have in our fleet, marked and unmarked.
So on the average, I think you may have told us this before, it depends on the vehicle usage. I mean, what it's going to be used for, I would think.
Yep.
So what was the normal mileage that you would normally replace a vehicle at? Say it's on the road, you know, one of the patrol cars.
Yeah, a Tahoe somewhere right around 130 to 150, somewhere in there. The 2007 is a little bit lower, but that's a very old vehicle for our fleet. That's the oldest vehicle in our fleet. A sedan vehicle, 110 to 125, somewhere in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Next item, item E, would be the board will consider a motion to approve the payment of $25,516.77 to Aetna Supply of Grand Rapids for the maintenance and hosting fees for Census Analytics and Census R&I, and authorize Township Superintendent to execute all related contracts and purchase orders. Mr. Lemata?
So this is really, and I can have Jeff respond to it, but it's just an annual maintenance fee for the FlexNet system. The FlexNet system is what we use for reading all the meters in the township. It's just our, again, the annual service contract.
Yeah. Any questions or concerns? Okay. We will then move on Thursday to future positioning. And item A, the board will consider the request from the City of Grand Blanc for contracting fire department services at a rate of $85,470 per quarter, with an option for an additional 3 months renewable term, with the requirement that Station 1 remain open during the contract period. Now, Mr. Laddie, this is a contract that they're, and these terms are terms that they're putting forward. Would this be appropriate for an executive session discussion?
It would. Plus, I have some attorney-client communication that I'd like to share with you. So yeah, if you would reserve some time tonight for an executive session for this topic, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. I think we're in favor of that. Item B, the board will consider the notice from the City of Grand Blanc that they have unilaterally passed a motion to become the employer for all employees of the Joint Parks and Recreation Department. So, Mr. Lemata, I know that you received some correspondence and sent some correspondence out with Mr. Laddie. Do you care to comment? Or would you like Mr. Laddie to comment?
I'll kick it off and then have...
You can kick it off and then Mr. Laddie can follow up.
So they had, the City Council held a special meeting on February 27th to discuss the concerns that had been stated about the employment liability specifically, but general liability with Parks and Recreation. At that meeting, they made a motion to become the employer of record. Their stated logic behind their motion was that that would keep the Parks and Recreation Commission intact. They would still have all the same authority and responsibilities that they now have. It's just that the city would basically become the employer of record and seek to indemnify the township from any employment-related liability. I don't think, if you recall back in February when we presented to the board the information from our Labor Council about what the potential were, number one, create an authority that they would solely have the ability to be a standalone entity and run Parks and Recreation, own property, levy taxes, that kind of thing. Number two would be, you know, for one of us entities to become the employer of record. Three, seek an agreement that we could get some sort of hold harmless, or the Parks and Rec Commission agrees to defend or indemnify us. Again, the Labor Council didn't believe that to be a viable option. I think this does the same thing. We don't believe it's a viable option. What Bodden had said is that the problem is it's going to follow the money, and in the end, because the Parks and Rec Commission doesn't have the ability to really indemnify us in the event of a employment lawsuit. And then the other thing is that if you're really going to have the Parks and Rec Commission, one of the reasons that I said we had liability that concerned me in the first place is the Parks and Rec Commission does not necessarily have any employment law background or human resource background, and they're making decisions that absolutely could cause issues with Fair Labor Standards Act, et cetera. So I think the city doing it, the concerns that I would have for that obviously are the city doesn't currently allow Parks and Rec to do anything as far as managing their Parks and Recreation Department. If this board were to agree with the city's motion to become the employer of record, we're basically handing them Parks and Recreation, and it would be city employees who would be involved in scheduling our pavilions and field rentals, running those tournaments. It would be city of Grand Blanc employees who would be operating our park system. That brings up more concerns for liability than the previous arrangement that we had. So I don't see it as a viable option. I did meet with Kay and Jamie today, in fact, and got some more information. I know Attorney Laddie has met with the attorneys for the school and the city. I know that there's a solution there. I know that our goal is to make sure that we continue to operate the fantastic Parks and Recreation programming that we're known for in the Grand Blanc community. And I just feel like the township is certainly the entity that's poised to be the employer of record, not only in name, but in reality, so that we have much more control over that type of thing that prevents us from liability.
No, I agree, and I also agree with the Bodman opinion regarding an agreement that looks more like an indemnity agreement than true responsibilities for human resources. And what I think, although I did receive an email from Attorney Griffin that says that the city has, quote, voted to accept all park personnel as employees. This should satisfy the township's concerns. Unfortunately, maybe we didn't properly communicate our concerns, because our concerns are ongoing liability issues that are occurring in our parks, but also are occurring at the commission level, but also from the parks staff at the administrative level. And our concerns about employment liability are not, again, just offering up another potential economic shield. It's solving some of the ongoing problems that we've become aware are occurring. And I think those problems are occurring because there isn't the resources available for nearly day-to-day human resource guidance, not only for the Parks and Rec Commission, but also for the administration of Parks and Rec. And so I agree with Mr. Lehman. I don't. This falls short of what we were trying to solve. Also, and you remember this began to occur as far back as last spring, when the Parks and Rec Commission themselves began to look at rewriting that very old joint agreement between the schools and the city and the township, and they had made a number of changes to that agreement potentially, and we invited the city and the schools to join us in rewriting that agreement, not just necessarily related to employment liability concerns, but also other parts of the agreement that had either morphed into something different or regressed into something that was no longer in effect. And one of the things that I personally have learned throughout this process is I've gotten to know the facilities that are in use for Parks and Rec. I've gotten to learn basically about the programming and how it seems to me that the majority, approximately 60% of the programs that occur through the Parks and Rec through the year are occurring at Creasy Park, on our park. The other 40% are being programmed at the schools, which was interesting to me. I think also there are, and I also believe that the lion's share of the annual Parks and Rec budget is generated by user fees for those programs. Also, in meeting with Kay and Jamie and Carol Newman at Parks and Rec, was able to get a really good idea of how Parks and Rec operates as essentially a separate, I don't want to say entity, but they are not they do not operate under the municipal shield of either the city or the schools or the township. And in discussions with Parks and Rec staff and in discussions with Superintendent Limita, it occurred to me that there is a stark contrast between the way our finance department is operated in Grand Blanc Township. I'm assuming the way the city's finance department operates, and also the schools operates. And it's occurring to me that in addition to HR and employment liability concerns, on a daily basis, basically. There are also a number of financing methods that are not consistent with what you see typically in a municipal organization. And I agree with Superintendent Lemata that when you add up the employment liability, when you add up the fact that 60% of the programming happens in Creasy Park, that the city has no parks that Parks and Rec is programming for, that it makes sense that we would be the employer of record, but also that the day-to-day operations of being employer of record would also mean that they would have to become integrated into our financing methods and accounting practices. And I think that might actually result in some economic savings. I think in discussions with Superintendent Lemata, there may be possibilities where personnel are duplicated. There may be possibilities where administrative or financing or insurance products are duplicated. There may be a lot, in addition to shoring up the liability concerns, both now on the employment issues and on the financing issues, there may be opportunities to streamline it and make it more efficient and save money, frankly. So the way I left it with Attorney Griffin and Attorney Chisholm is that, first of all, we all we all agree that the programming and the facilities are fantastic in the Grand Lake community. We all like our partnership with the schools. We all enjoy how Creasy Park's being programmed, and we want to continue that partnership with the schools. We want the city to participate as well, even though none of their assets are being programmed necessarily. And so what I told them is I would meet with you and I would discuss my feeling and I think Superintendent Lemata's feeling that our personnel or our employment liability issues still remain, and also that we have administrative economic concerns that we think we could solve if Grand Lake were identified as the employer of record, but also acted as the employer of record. And that we would respond to their offer to be the employer of record. And frankly, my suggestion to you is, considering the information that Mr. Lemata has been able to gather, considering my discussion with the attorneys in the matter, I think that we should explore offering them, again, the Grand Lake Township become the employer of record, that Grand Lake Township take the programming for the, certainly Creasy Park, and also the schools in-house, and that we also give Parks and Rec the benefit of our financing methods and accounting expertise in the township, and see if we can't save money, see if we can't eliminate employment liability, and move forward in that regard. And the one thing I want to talk about, which is interesting to me because I've been here a while, but I didn't really know how it operates, and that is the senior center. I understand that we're partners with the senior center. I understand that there's a county millage that is shared with the Grand Lake Senior Center. I understand there's a director. There's also at least one other, or maybe two other personnel, and I believe that the Parks and Rec Commission has been given the responsibility to secure that millage funding to make up any shortfalls in the millage funding, but also basically to administer the operation of the senior center. I think that this is something that we've got to pay some attention to, because when I talk about Parks and Rec programming, particularly as it relates to Creasy Park and the schools, I don't anticipate Parks and Rec still keeping the senior center. I anticipate that as something that we need to enter into a discussion with the city about how we, as co-owners of the building, want to proceed with the senior center, and we want to make sure that it's also economically cared for, but also that it's become as efficient as it can be. So I guess what I'm suggesting is I'd like your feedback to go back to the attorneys for the city and schools and say, Grand Lake Township appreciates the attention the city's given the matter. We want to propose to be again, employer of record. We want to handle it in-house. We want our finances and our finance department to handle the economics of it. But we do want to talk about the senior center, and we're open to how we should co-operate the senior center.
I never like to go against an attorney's advice. Mr. Massey, you had your hand up?
Yes, I have a question for the attorney and superintendent. It's been so long since I dealt with real estate issues. I'm not really clear on this, but I'd like for you to clear up something. when you talk about the employee of record, I think of giving the city full power of the parks and rec. That's what I think, okay? Now, thinking along those lines, isn't there a law that each state has, and I can only recall one state that I'm most familiar with at the time I took real estate practice and real estate law, okay? If someone takes over your property and maintain that property for X number of years, it becomes their property.
Well, there is that doctrine of law in Michigan as well, and I don't. If we agree to allow somebody to administer our parks or to repair or take care of our parks, I don't think we would run afoul of that doctrine of law that would allow them then to make a claim for the title of it. But it does bring up other issues as far as premises liability, and I've been talking to you for the last couple of months primarily about employment liability, but premises liability still exists. It exists for the schools, and it exists for Grand Lake Township, because if there's some physical condition at those parks, and let's say the city was the employer of record, and a Parks and Rec employee got hurt at our park, then we would have a couple of different issues. We'd have workers' comp claim, basically for that employee with the city's comp carrier, but also we would potentially have a premises liability claim for us in Creasy Park. It becomes obvious to me when you can't reverse that scenario, where if we were the employer of record, you're not going to have our employee become hurt at a city park, because the city parks aren't assets in Parks and Rec, in the current administration. So I know I varied off from your initial question, but no, there isn't really a danger that they could claim title to our property, but the competing employment liability and premises liability is still very much a concern, as you point out.
Mr. Mansour?
So I had a couple questions. I think Superintendent Lehman used the term in the letter, indemnify. Was that a term? Did they offer to indemnify us on OPEB-related expenses?
No.
Okay, that's just stop. Fine. So, and I think there was also a theme where I think we're kind of dancing around the Parks and Rec Commission. You called it separate, maybe that wasn't exactly right, but certainly independent would be a fair characterization of that, right?
Sure.
And so we have a parks condition here where, again, the fees are generated out of our Creasy Park and the schools. We are still liable for a lot of the employment type of issues. We're having to kind of work around this independent commission. I guess I just don't understand, with all of the interest that we have in it as a township, why we would want to continue with a independent commission running this.
Well, from a practical standpoint, you've hit the nail right on the head. I don't, if we're 60% of the programming, and it happens on our property, and the other 40% is at the schools and programmed through Parks and Rec, I don't know why the city would be the employer of record, and especially if they're going to actually act and administer.
But even at that, I mean, their proposal is kind of picking and choosing what they want to be responsible for or not responsible for. So, okay, so from my understanding of this, I guess I'm not any different than kind of where we started before. Was we have a strong interest in this thing, so we ought to take the leadership role in basically programming and employment.
I subscribe to what Mr. Laddie outlined as well, as far as proposing to the city and the schools. The senior center, I think Mr. Lehman is in the process of getting an actual to budget financial report for the senior center, because right now the senior center is kind of blended into the financial situation, I should call it, of the Parks and Rec. So we really don't have a clear understanding. We know what their budget is, but we don't know what the actual expenditures are for that in a given year. But I think, you know, the senior center should be a separate issue that we need to take a look at, both, you know, financially as to, we know what the millage money that comes in from that. What we need a clear picture on is what would be required of the township and the city as far as additional funding. I think just like the library, we need to take a long-term look at it too, you know. Right now with the library, we're having a couple of individuals look at the physical structure of the building to see what the long-term needs are for that. I don't know, you know, if the senior center is in a similar situation, you know, but we need to get an assessment. It's just like buying a business. I mean, we're half owners of the thing, so we should know that anyways, but
I don't mean to interrupt, but it's set up exactly like the library is, where the library provides all of the programming and services, and we provide the building in partnership with the city. From my understanding, the senior center is almost that, except there's maybe 10% of funding that falls short.
Okay.
So it's almost exactly like the library.
Right.
But
so we want to get a clear picture of what that is. Mr. Massey?
But let me put this in. Let me say it this way. I think we need to take a deep dive into the senior center, because it's set up in such a way that it's set up by each senior's center is set up by levels. So this may be a good example. I think Grand Blanc Senior Center is a level 3. So it's graded every year, okay? So if it went back to a level 2, Grand Blanc Senior Center would not receive as much money from the millage.
Well, and that may be true, and that's one thing. That's one common theme that we have throughout all these discussions. Is we're not talking about cutting back services for anybody, either at the senior level or Parks and Rec. We're talking about making them better and more efficient. But that's an interesting point that you raised. We want to make sure that it's preserved as the highest level facility as it can.
Mm-hmm. So we need to get a handle on where we're at and where it's headed. But I think, you know, that the points that you bring up, Mr. Laddie, both in your written form and today, I subscribe to. Mr. Lemata?
And so just to update the board, I did meet this afternoon with Director Kay Edson and Assistant Director Jamie Weasel, and they did inform me that they were in the city this morning meeting with the mayor and the city manager. They did have a conversation about discussion. Exactly what we're discussing now is the potential of separating the senior center operations out of Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation does come to the township as the employer of record. I had a conversation last Friday with Kay and talked to her about where I believe I see this thing going in order for it to work, and that with the senior operations being directly in the city, it could work very well as them taking over the employment tasks there while we do this. She said that they were amenable to at least having that conversation, but they had come back with the idea that we would share a Parks and Recreation director, and that we would be responsible for operating the programs in Bicentennial Park, and that the city would then also have half the recreation director, and they would be responsible for the programs that take place in the school facilities as well as senior center operations.
So, Mr. Lehman, is this Ms. Edson and Mr. Weasel's idea, or this is coming from the city?
I don't know if it was their idea or if it's just what came out of their conversation with the city this morning. And again, I'm glad to hear that the city was willing to sit down and have a conversation. Obviously, we're going to need to be part of that conversation moving forward and how we want to structure this. But I would have some concerns about what it does as far as from a registration standpoint. If I'm just somebody who is so used to dealing with Parks and Recreation, I want to register myself or my children for a program, I'm used to one-stop shopping. Now I'm if we went with the suggestion that came out of this morning's meeting, apparently, it would be if it's a winter program or if it's a swim program, then I need to go to the city's Parks and Recreation page to register, and if it's a summer program, then I have to go to the township's page to register. I think that, and I'm sure we can train people eventually, but I just see it as a duplication of efforts and somewhat problematic in in the initiation. I still envision more like we've been talking about, where the Parks and Rec operations comes under the umbrella of the township, and we have one-stop shopping for all programming and moving forward. We certainly want this to still be a community. I'm not, we want whether, as opposed to having a commission that has authority to make decisions on behalf of all three entities, I see more like an advisory panel where there's a smaller person panel who acts to advise about community events or programming. I think that would be much more conducive to be able to still be able to move, but still have people who, maybe representatives from the soccer or lacrosse or softball, baseball, swim, what have you, could meet at different times, different quarters, and they have a meeting and they work with the recreation director to try to move it forward. But I see us, if we try to split off registration, you manage this, I'll manage this, I think that I'd have some serious concerns about that.
I would too. Let's get any further comment, because I guess my question is going to be, after everybody has a comment, is I want to move this thing along and move on. But Miss Lane, any comments?
No, I agree. There has to be unanimity, but I do want to, we all want Parks and Rec to grow and continue to be better. But we do have to get it under control and manage it so that it can be better.
Mr. Atkins, any comment?
Yeah, I just, do we need to give, looking for ideas, does Mr. Laddie need some language? I totally agree. I think it's time to move on now, and not, I don't want this to turn into fire. I don't think anybody does, go back and forth, back and forth. I think we really know where we're going with this, or where we'd like to, and where the community would like to. Do we need more specific language, and just, I guess, what do we do next?
Well, a couple weeks ago, you, Mr. Laddie, and myself met and discussed for a little while some ideas to put into a potential offer. Would it be this board's wishes that maybe Mr. Laddie and I confer, and with Mr. Adkins as well, since he's the Parks, and Mr. Limit as well. Mr. Adkins serves on the Parks Commission, but we discuss maybe by phone conference or meet and go over some of those concepts that we discussed, and maybe firm that up for our meeting on Thursday to take a look at, for this board to look at some of those ideas in written form, and then present that to the city. But sure. Yes, Mr. Massey.
Mr. Chair, are we having an executive session?
Not on this topic.
I mean, are we having an executive session tonight?
We are.
Okay.
But it will be with regard to fire that we're going to have that. So
okay.
If there's any discussion, we can have it right here with regard to Parks and Rec.
Okay, I would like to.
Go ahead.
Well, my comment now has changed.
Sure.
I'd like for you guys to move forward. Continue the progress that you had put in place.
Okay.
The process that you have in place.
Mr. Laddie and Mr. Lima, do you think we could do that and present something to our board on Thursday?
Sure. Yeah. We can
okay.
do that.
And you're including Mr. Atkins in that
yes,
as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I knew he was in favor. I just wondered if they would.
Okay.
Well, and again, I'm envisioning something that, with the concepts that Mr. Lima and I presented,
right,
separating out senior center,
right,
township as employer of record, in essentially a township department, the Parks and Rec Commission as an advisory board, for programming, and to also to receive comments from school representatives and city representatives. And also, again, the idea that we still have Grand Blanc Community Parks and Recreation, and we still have, our budgets have been nearly funded by programming, but they've also relied on contributions from the city and the township, and that will continue. The city will continue to be an integral part of Parks and Rec, but again, the operations of Parks and Rec will be under the township responsibility.
Right. So, discussion on post-retirement benefits also, I'm not sure where that fits in for Parks and Rec. We're looking at approximately, on paper, Mr. Lima, what is there, Mr. Laddie, 120,000.
118, at least it was in their audit. It's
Right.
118.
But when we have the actuarial report, we expect it to be about 3 times that amount, right? I mean,
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to say it until we have an actuarial look at it, but it's clearly something we have to have done if we're moving forward, because right now, depending on how you want to look at it, I view it as we're 33 1/3 liable for whatever OPEB liability exists. So we need to have the actuarial determination done.
what would be a cost for having, I'm sorry, Mr. Laddie?
No, I think we do have to have an actuarial determined amount. And what we do with that amount will be a little different, because as we've discussed, there have been sort of morphing contributions for the various parties throughout the life of our agreement. And so we're going to have to figure out how we handle that past responsibility. The other thing is, it's just another glaring example of something that needs constant attention by a municipal body that's responsible for reporting that and handling that. And Grand Lake Township we've gone to great lengths recently to try to get a handle on our OPEB liabilities, and this is just another one that's hanging out there. So that will be an issue that we're going to have to continue to discuss with them, because we're going to have to account for that liability, and it'll be interesting to see what the final figure is.
So if it were 300,000, I mean, that's something that will have to be negotiated, how that's paid. It might not be necessarily part of this, I mean, I would just want to make sure that if we agree that we're becoming the employer of record, we're not assuming the liability for that.
We're going to have to handle that issue. But I'll give you an example. If Grand Lake Township and the city have handled the split of obligation 60-40 with no contribution from the schools in the past, we're going to have to figure out how we reverse engineer the accumulation of that expense. And I think if you're the schools, you're gonna, even though we're 1/3 partners in that original agreement, they're gonna want to have a fair amount of discussion about who's financially gonna be responsible for that.
Ms. Lane?
First of all, I would have no problem with asking Superintendent Limita to proceed with an actuarial report for Parks and Rec. But secondly, in your response to the school's liability, I personally would not feel that they have any responsibility towards this, because they are paying and have been paying the total retirement costs for the first director, Chuck Creasy, and his spouse, the defined contribution plan and the OPEB. So I think they have assumed a greater expense over the years and have continued to for years. So limiting, I would have no problem, because of them taking over all of that 4 years and continuing on through the present day, to leave the actuarial more between the city and the township for the current employees.
Well, you as a group will have a chance to address
Right.
it.
Okay, well, I'm just letting the
I don't know that
board know
we're-
what
yeah.
they're doing.
I don't know we're there yet, but the actuarial, what do you think the cost would be for something like that, Mr. Lehman?
It's, to do us, typically it was about $7,000 before the new GASB rules came in. It's much smaller to look at Parks and Recreation and do it. I would assume that we'll put it out for, RFQs, and I would think that it should be able to be done within a couple of thousand, $2,000 to $3,000 range, no more.
Ms. Lane?
Would we have to go out for requests for proposals? We have someone that is adept at our own actuarial, and assuming that we are becoming the employer of record, having our current actuarial do this, that would make it easier to fold in when they have to continue all of our future ones, just to be consistent.
Well, are we going to want to fold it into ours? I'm not sure that's the case. Mr. Laddie?
Plus it isn't necessarily it isn't our debt, right?
Yeah.
So I think that if we selected a competitive bidder after the RFQ process, it might be a little more comforting to the city or the.
Well, and the thing I want to be careful of is, Mr. Lehman, it's not going to be at this meeting that I don't believe we're going to talk about OPEB, but it's coming up in future board meetings where we're going to talk about what the state is saying about our post-retirement benefits and our actuarial reports, but I'm not sure, I mean, we're trying to dig ourselves out of a hole already. I don't want to make the hole bigger by adding more liability to that, by adding Parks and Rec, as if it looks like it's more liability on top of what we have now. Mr. Atkins?
I know it's not necessarily on the agenda detailed out, but would it be appropriate to just, in the interest of time and what we're trying to pull together to, you know, it's a small amount of money and we know we need to do it. Would it be appropriate to give the Superintendent Limita the authorization to just move forward and get this done?
I would like to. I mean,
That was my proposal as well.
Yeah, it's, I think, is it a consensus that we do something like that, Mr. Massey? Or you?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would be glad to make a motion so that it is thorough, that we
Let's do that on
authorize.
Thursday.
Oh, all right.
I mean, I think we want to do it on Thursday, so
I understand.
let's make a note that we want to make a motion on Thursday
All right.
to do that.
If it's board's consensus, I can move. I mean, it's
Okay.
within my
So
spending
you're spending
authority.
money?
Unless it
Okay.
came back for some reason outside of my spending authority, I'd have to come back to you anyway. But
Okay.
you know, I'd be happy to start the process and get the
Okay.
RFQs out.
All right, good.
Forward.
All right.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we're starting the process
Yes.
as of tonight.
For the, to get a proposal or to move forward on getting an actuarial report for the
Yes.
post-retirement benefits for Parks and Recreation.
Yes.
So we know, as we're discussing with schools and with the city, what that liability looks like. Because if we do become, and I fully believe that we're going to be the employer of record one way or the other, I don't want to necessarily assume that onto our books. And I'm not sure that we have to. Do we, Mr. Laddie?
Not necessarily, but it's a you know, it's a figure that everyone needs to know what that figure is, and it's high time we figure out what that answer is.
Right. So, okay. Anything else on Parks and Rec? We're going to, then Mr. Atkins, Mr. Leamton, Mr. Laddie, myself will discuss in the next day or so before Thursday's meeting, and we'll have something for us to consider passing on to the schools and to the city with regard to Parks and Rec. Okay. Operational issues. The board will consider a motion to approve the paving estimates for Reed Road for $70,123.87 and Howe Road for $117,085.67, and authorize Township Supervisor to execute the local road agreements. Mr. Limita?
We're going to have both Director Sears and
Careful.
Here to help discuss it, but it's really, this is the 50-50 money that we allocate every year, and we take a look at. We work with the road commission on it. We look at all the roads that are available. We look at Pacer ratings. We head down to the road commission office and we walk through all the different scenarios and try to find the biggest bang for the dollars that we have available to us. I'll let Director Sears talk about why we specifically selected these, because you know, even though Wakefield Road, and you and I have a meeting coming up on Wakefield Road, could be considered to be worse, but we think that we have other opportunities. And again, we try to fit what money we have available in that any given year, and then based on what's the biggest bang for our buck at that time. Jeff?
So like Dennis said, him and I met with the road commission a couple months ago. We went down the laundry list of all of our local roads that are in need of some repair. The good news is that for the majority, our local road system, which is not the Dordt highways or Saginaw streets or Baldwin roads, but you know, like the Cook roads and Howe and Embry, they're all in relatively good shape. The Pacer ratings are all pretty good for those. We had a list. I included some of the roads that we decided not to move forward with at this time, which included Industrial Park Drive, Gibson Road, Wakefield Road, and Pollock Road. Two of those are potential projects with Consumers Energy. I don't know the status of that yet. I know the Road Commission's been working with them on those to get those paved in conjunction with the Saginaw pipeline that's coming through, that's being replaced. These two projects that we're presenting tonight, Reed Road and Howe Road, gave us the biggest bang for our buck. It's going to add 10 years to the life of these roads at least. It is a one Reed Road is a 2-inch cap on that. The surface is not terrible, but we thought if we did this cap now, it preserves the surface. It's also a school route. West Middle School is at the end of this road, so there's a lot of traffic down through there. And then Howe Road is not in great shape, but the Road Commission feels a 3-inch overlay would be perfect for that area right now. And that really does a lot to our Paisley ratings for our local road systems. I can answer any questions you have about our decision-making process or these projects in particular.
Mr. Sears, there's several roads that the Road Commission has on their plans for repaving. So for example, Hill Road will be started this summer, and that'll
April,
go
yeah.
April. So that'll go from Fountain Road all the way to Dort Highway.
Yep.
They have plans for Cook Road for what, the following year?
Cook Road was included in the TIP or one of the applications, and I'm not sure that that's been awarded yet, but they applied for that in 3 phases to repave that.
So that would be in the next year or two.
That would also be allocation fund, because there would be a township match on that project, and we would be able to use our allocation funds. Cook Road happens to be a local road that's eligible for federal funding, so they were able to apply for those grants.
Anything on the Embry, Grand Blanc? I know we...
Yeah, but, well, obviously, Scott, I talked to you about intersection of Embry and Grand Blanc Road. The Road Commission was awarded funding for a roundabout. And they did call me the other day and ask if we still wanted to proceed with the traffic signal, knowing that a roundabout would probably be built in 2020. So I left that decision up to Scott to kind of pull everybody and see what direction we want to go in. My personal opinion is that we hold off on the traffic signal and build the roundabout, but I know that there is a concern there for traffic congestion too, and it would relieve the congestion in the short term.
What was the cost of the traffic signal, Mr. Sears? Do you remember? Just roughly, was it 60,000?
I don't even think it was that much.
Okay, all right.
I don't remember off the top of my head. I
And
want
they
to
would
say
put
it was in the $20,000 range.
Yeah, okay. But they would put the money towards the...
Roundabout.
They would put the money towards the roundabout anyways.
I can't guarantee how much of that money they would put towards that. They did say that they could potentially put some of that money towards the roundabout that we've already paid in.
Right.
But we'll still have to pay over that, because the roundabout is going to be a matching situation for us also.
Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, I have a comment, Director Sears. I've done some research on roundabouts, and I was a little confused because I'm very disappointed in the roundabouts in this area. And what my research revealed is that the roundabouts that I'm most familiar with are much larger than the roundabouts that you guys had some input in installing in this area. All the other roundabouts that I'm familiar with, as I said, are about twice the size. So if you're going to do something at Emory Road and Grand Blanc Road, please keep in mind a small roundabout will just create a bigger mess.
Sure.
It has to be larger. Even the roundabout over at the GM facility on Bristol Road, that roundabout is too small. I mean, that's not my personal opinion, that's an engineering opinion. It's just too small. Now, I don't know what went into it, what thinking, the engineering, etc., but it's just really too small.
Sure. And we really don't have all that much input on what the Road Commission is going to design there. They didn't indicate that it would be quite a large roundabout. It'd probably be several lanes wide. But again, they just got the funding, so I think any talk right now is preliminary on the design work. But we can certainly pass on our opinions and our requests to the Road Commission. Whether they take it lightly or not, I don't know, but we can do that.
But you stated an interesting point. That's what I mean, too small. By having several lanes in the roundabout still makes it smaller.
Yeah.
But when you eliminate, say just you have 2 lanes, but the roundabout is twice as large, I'm just using this as an example, the one on Bristol Road at the GM facility, the traffic would flow much easier.
Sure, if it were larger.
Yes.
Sure.
Mr. Atkins?
Probably don't know anything about timing yet, but it would be, I'm sure a lot of parents would be thankful if this happened next year at the end of the school year.
Which project?
The roundabout.
The roundabout, I would assume would be after the school year, but they did start the Hill and Beltsy one before school got out. It was supposed to start later after school got out. I don't know what changed there. But again, we can pass on that input to them and, you know, ask them to try and hold off the majority of the construction until after school is let out.
And then in terms of the traffic light, you know, I'm torn 50-50 on it because, you know, to be a good steward of tax dollars, it would probably make most sense to hold off on it. Although I'm sure a lot of parents would expect us all to feel some of that pain at 7:30 or 7:45 in the morning. I have driven my children to school there, and it's bad in the morning. Really bad. So
it's bad in the evening too.
Parents and businesses along there have long advocated for something to happen at that intersection. So it's kind of a difficult decision to make either way.
Well, for me, you know, sitting at the light isn't the issue. That, you know, hey, people read their phones and whatever while they're sitting there. But for me, the issue is more I'm waiting. You know, I keep my fingers crossed that there's no fatality at that intersection. I see people taking some very risky moves because the traffic is so stacked up that by the time they get up there, the pressure on them to cut across there, if they're going left onto Grand Blanc from southbound Embury, you know, they feel the pressure. I got to go, you know, and so there's people fit, you know, and it's almost like people are targeting the cars coming off Embury. I mean, I think they speed up when they see somebody trying to come up.
It feels like that sometimes.
And, you know, and I also see people not even stopping because, hey, if there's a clearing, get as many cars through that intersection as possible. So for me, you know, the light thing is more of a safety thing, you know, rather than being a convenience or inconvenience. It's, gosh, you know, I hate to have something happen to somebody trying to cross Grand Blanc Road at that stop sign because it just, you know.
Sure.
I mean, I feel the same way from a safety standpoint, and also sometimes you can never tell when these next larger projects are going to happen. Something could happen, and then all of a sudden, you know,
it goes away,
and or it's delayed a certain period of time. So I mean, an
That's
investment
a great point.
of $24,000 is maybe in the scheme of things not that bad.
Absolutely.
Miss Lane?
I would concur with both you and Trustee Mansour. I think putting in the traffic signal is going to provide some safety. It also, since it's going to be something new, might identify something we haven't seen because of all the things that have been happening at that intersection that would make future planning for a roundabout or whatever else more thoughtful and more proper for what is needed. And we've got the Dort extension going on. I mean, as Mr. Mansour said, something could stall that, and at least we're providing safety. So it would be I would support all of you in saying, let's put in the traffic signal for safety, because I know we would all feel horribly guilty for any accident at that intersection.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like we have a consensus for the traffic light there, and hope that they get the roundabout. And who knows, like you say, maybe they'll decide to put a roundabout at both intersections, Grand Blanc and Dort and Embury. So
yeah, you never know what'll happen.
Right.
Yeah. Engineers have done some stupid things.
We'll send Row Engineering over there.
They could design this one, you never know.
Okay, you heard we want it real big.
Yeah. That might mean the school moves out too.
So, sounds good. We know that there's lots of roads need to be paved, and we appreciate, I understand, you know, consumers working with the road commission. We have crossing several roads in our township, and may cause for those roads to get some funding for paving as well.
Very good.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Future agenda items, the board will set a public hearing date of March 26, 2019 for the MNRTF grant application. Mr. Limita?
So we found out after the fact that this is what came before you last time, and we moved the resolution forward for funding. Then we got a request after that from Lindsay Ross from the Michigan DNR that we redo it and hold a public hearing in conjunction with it before we move it forward. So we're just asking the board to schedule a public hearing for March 26th. Our application deadline for our DNR grant is April 1st. And so this gives us plenty of time still to get our application in and still be able to provide them the public hearing and any comments that we receive in regards to it.
Okay. With that,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
if you're ready, we
Yep,
move
I
it.
think
I
we're
would make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss further the fire department services with the city.
Well, an agreement regarding fire services with the city, but also attorney-client communication.
Second. There's been a motion and supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Roll call.
I'm sorry, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes, and Mr.
Yes. Okay,
Two absent.
we'll see everybody in there in just a couple minutes.